Even if it were not so, there is no more reason that we should continue any imperfections which may be supposed to have characterized Shakespeare's stage mounting than that we should have Juliet played by a young man, or give up the advantage of changeable scenery. A great work of dramatic art should not merely be made expressive of modern passion by means of the actor, but should be presented to us in the form most suitable to the modern spirit. Racine produced his Roman plays in Louise Quatorze's dress on a stage crowded with spectators, but we require different conditions for the enjoyment of his art. Perfect accuracy of detail, for the sake of perfect illusion, is necessary for us. What we have to see is that the details are not allowed to usurp the principal place. They must be subordinate always to the general motive of the play. But subordination in art does not mean disregard of truth. It means conversion of fact into effect, and assigning to each detail its proper relative value. Les petits détails d'histoire et de vie domestique, says Hugo, doivent en scrupuleusement étudiés et reproduits par le poète, mais uniquement comme des moyens d'accroître la réalité de l'ensemble et de faire pénétrer jusque dans le coin le plus obscur de l'œuvre sa vie générale, et puisant en milieu de l'acte les personnages sont plus vrais, et la catastrophe, par conséquent, plus poignante. Tu dois être subordonné à ces buts, l'homme sur le premier plan, le reste enfant. This passage is interesting as coming from the first great French dramatist who employed archaeology on the stage, and whose plays, though absolutely correct in detail, are known to all for their passion, not for their pedantry, for their life, not for their learning. It is true that he has made certain concessions in the case of the employment of curious or strange expressions. Ruy Blas talks of Monsieur de Prigo as sujet de roi instead of noble de roi, and Angelo Malipreri speaks of La Croix Rouge instead of La Croix de Gouel. But they are concessions made to the public, or rather to a section of it. J'en offre ici tous mes excuses aux spectateurs intelligents, he says in a note to one of the plays, espérant qu'un jour un seigneur vénitien pourra dire tout bonnement sans péril, sans blason sur le théâtre, c'est un progrès qui viendra. And, though the description of the crest is not couched in accurate language, still the crest itself was accurately right. It may, of course, be said that the public do not notice these things. Upon the other hand, it should be remembered that art has no other aim but her own perfection, and proceeds simply by her own laws, and that the play which Hamlet describes as being caviar to the general is a play he highly praises. Besides, in England, at any rate, the public have undergone a transformation. There is far more appreciation of beauty now than there was a few years ago, and though they may not be familiar with the authorities and archaeological data for what is shown to them, still they enjoy whatever loveliness they look at. And this is the important thing. Better to take pleasure in a rose than to put its root under a microscope. Archaeological accuracy is merely a condition of illusionist stage effect. It is not its quality. And Lord Lytton's proposal that the dresses should merely be beautiful without being accurate is founded on a misapprehension of the nature of costume and of its value on the stage. This value is twofold, picturesque and dramatic. The former depends on the color of the dress, and the latter on its design and character. But so interwoven are the two that, whenever in our own day historical accuracy has been disregarded, and the various dresses in a play taken from different ages, the result has been that the stage has been turned into that chaos of costume, that caricature of the centuries, the fancy dress ball, to the entire ruin of all dramatic and picturesque effect. For the dresses of one age do not artistically harmonize with the dresses of another, and, as far as dramatic value goes, to confuse the costumes is to confuse the play. Costume is a growth, an evolution, and a most important, perhaps the most important, sign of the manners, customs, and mode of life of each century. The Puritan dislike of color, adornment, and grace in apparel was part of the great revolt of the middle classes against beauty in the 17th century, 1600s. A historian who disregarded it would give us a most inaccurate picture of the time, and a dramatist who did not avail himself of it would miss a most vital element in producing an illusionist effect. The effeminacy of dress that characterized the reign of Richard II was a constant theme of contemporary authors. Shakespeare, writing 200 years after, makes the king's fondness for gay apparel and foreign fashions a point in the play, from John of Gaunt's reproaches down to Richard's own speech in the third act on his deposition from the throne. And that Shakespeare examined Richard's tomb in Westminster Abbey seems to me certain from York's speech. See, King Richard doth himself appear, as doth the blushing discontented sun, from out the fiery portal of the east, when he perceives the envious clouds are bent to dim his glory. For we can still discern on the king's robe his favorite badge, the sun issuing from a cloud. In fact, in every age the social conditions are so exemplified in costume that to produce a 16th century, 1500s, play in 14th century, 1300s attire, or vice versa, would make the performance seem unreal because untrue. And, valuable as beauty of effect on the stage is, the highest beauty is not merely comparable with absolute accuracy of detail, but really dependent on it. To invent an entirely new costume is almost impossible except in burlesque or extravaganza. And as for combining the dress of different centuries into one, the experiment would be dangerous. And Shakespeare's opinion of the artistic value of such a medley may be gathered from his incessant satire of the Elizabethan dandies for imagining that they were well dressed because they got their doublets in Italy, their hats in Germany, and their hose in France. And it should be noted that the most lovely scenes that have been produced on our stage have been those that have been characterized by perfect accuracy, such as Mr. and Mrs. Bancroft's 18th century 1700 revivals at the Haymarket, Mr. Irving's superb production of Much Ado About Nothing, and Mr. Barrett's Claudian. Besides, and this is perhaps the most complete answer to Lord Lytton's theory, it must be remembered that neither in costume nor in dialogue is beauty the dramatist's primary aim at all. The true dramatist aims first at what is characteristic, and no more desires that all his personages should be beautifully attired than he desires that they should all have beautiful natures or speak beautiful English. The true dramatist, in fact, shows us life under the conditions of art, not art in the form of life. The Greek dress was the loveliest the world has ever seen, and the English dress of the last century one of the most monstrous, yet we cannot costume a play by Sheridan as we would costume a play by Sophocles. For, as Polonius says in his excellent lecture, a lecture to which I am glad to have the opportunity of expressing my obligations, one of the first qualities of apparel is its expressiveness, and the affected style of dress in the last century was the natural characteristic of a society of affected manners and affected conversation, a characteristic which the realistic dramatist will highly value, down to the smallest detail of accuracy, and the materials for which he can get only from archaeology. But it is not enough that a dress should be accurate. It must be also appropriate to the stature and appearance of the actor, and to his supposed condition, as well as to his necessary action in the play. In Mr. Hare's production of As You Like It at the St. James Theatre, for instance, the whole point of Orlando's complaint, that he is brought up like a peasant, and not like a gentleman, was spoiled by the gorgeousness of his dress, and the splendid apparel worn by the banished Duke and his friends was quite out of place. Mr. Lewis Wingfield's explanation that the sumptuary laws of the period necessitated their doing so is, I am afraid, hardly sufficient. Outlaws, lurking in a forest and living by the chase, are not very likely to care much about ordinances of dress. They were probably attired like Robin Hood's men, to whom, indeed, they are compared in the course of the play. And that their dress was not that of wealthy noblemen may be seen by Orlando's words when he breaks in upon them. He mistakes them for robbers, and is amazed to find that they answer him in courteous and gentle terms. Lady Archibald Campbell's production, under Mr. E. W. Godwin's direction, of the same play in Coombe Woods was, as regards mounting, far more artistic. At least it seemed so to me. The Duke and his companions were dressed in serge tunics, leathern jerkins, high boots, and gauntlets, and wore bicock hats and hoods. And as they were playing in a real forest, they found, I am sure, their dresses extremely convenient. To every character in the play was given a perfectly appropriate attire, and the brown and green of their costumes harmonized exquisitely with the ferns through which they wandered, the trees beneath which they lay, and the lovely English landscape that surrounded the pastoral players. The perfect naturalness of the scene was due to the absolute accuracy and appropriateness of everything that was worn. Nor could archaeology have been put to a severer test or come out of it more triumphantly. The whole production showed once for all that, unless a dress is archaeologically correct and artistically appropriate, it always looks unreal, unnatural, and theatrical in the sense of artificial. Nor, again, is it enough that there should be accurate and appropriate costumes of beautiful colors. There must be also beauty of color on the stage as a whole. And as long as the background is painted by one artist and the foreground figures independently designed by another, there is the danger of a want of harmony in the scene as a picture. For each scene, the color scheme should be settled as absolutely as for the decoration of a room, and the textures which it is proposed to use should be mixed and remixed in every possible combination, and what is discordant removed. Then, as regards the particular kinds of colors, the stage is often made too glaring, partly through the excessive use of hot, violent reds, and partly through the costumes looking too new. Shabbiness, which in modern life is merely the tendency of the lower orders towards tone, is not without its artistic value, and modern colors are often much improved by being a little faded. Blue also is too frequently used. It is not merely a dangerous color to wear by gaslight, but it is really difficult in England to get a thoroughly good blue. The fine Chinese blue, which we also much admire, takes 2 years to dye, and the English public will not wait so long for a color. Peacock blue, of course, has been employed on the stage, notably at the Lyceum, with great advantage, but all attempts at a good light blue or good dark blue, which I have seen, have been failures. The value of black is hardly appreciated. It was used effectively by Mr. Irving in Hamlet as the central note of a composition, but as a tone-giving neutral its importance is not recognized. And this is curious, considering the general color of the dress of a century in which, as Baudelaire says, nous célébrons tout quelque entièrement. The archaeologist of the future will probably point to this age as a time when the beauty of black was understood, but I hardly think that, as regards stage mounting or house decoration, it really is. Its decorative value is, of course, the same as that of white or gold. It can separate and harmonize colors. In modern plays, the black frock coat of the hero becomes important in itself and should be given a suitable background, but it rarely is. Indeed, the only good background for a play in modern dress which I have ever seen was the dark gray and cream-white scene of the first act of Princess George in Mrs. Langtry's production. As a rule, the hero is smothered in bric-a-brac and palm trees, lost in the gilded abyss of Louis XIV's furniture, or reduced to a mere midge in the midst of marqueterie, whereas the background should always be kept as a background, and color subordinated to effect. This, of course, can only be done when there is one single mind directing the whole production. The facts of art are diverse, but the essence of artistic effect is unity. Monarchy, anarchy, and republicanism may contend for the government of nations, but a theater should be in the power of a cultured despot. There may be division of labor, but there must be no division of mind. Whoever understands the costume of an age understands of necessity its architecture and its surroundings also, and it is easy to see from the chairs of a century whether it was a century of crinolines or not. In fact, in art there is no specialism, and a really artistic production should bear the impress of one master, and one master only, who not merely should design and arrange everything, but should have complete control over the way in which each dress is to be worn. Mademoiselle Mars, in the first production of Hernani, absolutely refused to call her lover Mauleon unless she was allowed to wear a little fashionable toque, then much in vogue on the boulevards. And many young ladies on our own stage insist to the present day on wearing stiff starched petticoats under Greek dresses, to the entire ruin of all delicacy of line and fold. But these wicked things should not be allowed, and there should be far more dress rehearsals than there are now. Actors such as Mr. Forbes Robertson, Mr. Conway, Mr. George Alexander, and others, not to mention older artists, can move with ease and elegance in the attire of any century. But there are not a few who seem dreadfully embarrassed about their hands if they have no side pockets, and who always wear their dresses as if they were costumes. Costumes, of course, they are to the designer, but dresses they should be to those that wear them. And it is time that a stop should be put to the idea, very prevalent on the stage, that the Greeks and Romans always went about bareheaded in the open air, a mistake the Elizabethan managers did not fall into, for they gave hoods as well as gowns to their Roman senators. More dress rehearsals would also be of value in explaining to the actors that there is a form of gesture and movement that is not merely appropriate to each style of dress, but really conditioned by it. The extravagant use of the arms in the 18th century, 1700s, for instance, was the necessary result of the large hoop, and the solemn dignity of Burleigh owed as much to his ruff as to his reason. Besides, until an actor is at home in his dress, he is not at home in his part. Of the value of beautiful costume in creating an artistic temperament in the audience, and producing that joy and beauty for beauty's sake, without which the great masterpieces of art can never be understood, I will not here speak, though it is worthwhile to notice how Shakespeare appreciated that side of the question in the production of his tragedies, acting them always by artificial light, and in a theater hung with black. But what I have tried to point out is that archaeology is not a pedantic method, but a method of artistic illusion, and that costume is a means of displaying character without description, and of producing dramatic situations and dramatic effects. And I think it is a pity that so many critics should have set themselves to attack one of the most important movements on the modern stage, before that movement has at all reached its proper perfection. That it will do so, however, I feel as certain as that we shall require from our dramatic critics in the future higher qualifications than that they can remember Macready or have seen Benjamin Webster. We shall require of them, indeed, that they cultivate a sense of beauty. Pour être plus difficile, la tâche n'esque plus glorieuse. And if they will not encourage, at least they must not oppose, a movement of which Shakespeare of all dramatists would have most approved, for it has the illusion of truth for its method, and the illusion of beauty for its result. Not that I agree with everything that I have said in this essay. There is much with which I entirely disagree. The essay simply represents an artistic standpoint, and in aesthetic criticism, attitude is everything. For in art, there is no such thing as a universal truth. A truth in art is that whose contradictory is also true. And just as it is only in art criticism, and through it, that we can apprehend the Platonic theory of ideas, so it is only in art criticism, and through it, that we can realize Hegel's system of contraries. The truths of metaphysics are the truths of masks.